Broadcasting from deep behind enemy lines in the occupied territory of the Socialist Republic of California. Your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate, Tim Donnelly.
Here we go again. GOP debate number 4 is in the cards for this evening. The undercard debate starting shortly with such luminaries as Governor Chris Christie, Mike Huckabee, and others. Unfortunately, our favorite here at the Tim Donnelly Show, Lindsey Don't Vote For Me Graham, is not going to make it. He didn't even make the undercard debate, which is shocking. And perhaps there should be a full-fledged investigation. I'm sorry, I can't even do that with a straight face. But the debate is going to be in Milwaukee, historic Milwaukee theater. I love Milwaukee. I love everything about Wisconsin. I'm a huge Packers fan, even though I have not been able to get into football this year for some reason, too deeply entrenched in politics. We have a great show lined up for you today. We've got Adele Nazarian coming in at 3:35 to talk about the Ferguson effect. She's written an interesting piece about the spread of this political correctness, this politically correct paralysis that is strangling the country. We're going to continue to document it because if you don't talk about things, if you don't call them out, if you don't inform, educate, you can't engage. And so you need to see it for what it is and not be pulled in by it. A bad day for Hillary Clinton. She is there's a story on Politico. Politico, more and more, we're finding good stories there. They do a lot of investigative journalism. They're saying that the inquiry into Hillary Clinton's private email server has graduated from just another scandal to a full-fledged FBI investigation. And it's interesting. I'll read you a little bit of the story. Even as Hillary Clinton tries to put questions about her private email server behind her, the FBI has stepped up inquiries into the security of the former Secretary of State's homemade email system and how aides communicated over email. This is according to Politico.com, story up today. The FBI's recent move suggests its inquiry could have evolved from the preliminary fact-finding stage that the agency launches when it receives a credible referral, according to former FBI and Justice Department officials interviewed by Politico. Sounds to me like it's more than a preliminary investigation. It sounds like a full-blown investigation, according to Tom Fuentes, former assistant director of the FBI. When you have this amount of resources going into it, I think it's at the investigative level. The FBI declined to respond to questions about the scope of its ongoing work. Of course they did, as they should. But Politico learned that around early October, the FBI requested documents from a company involved in the server arrangement after Clinton left the State Department. It also interviewed a former high-ranking official at State about the contents of top Clinton aides' emails. The official who spoke to Politico on condition of anonymity said the questions explored whether anyone at State was concerned about the classified information being put at risk by communicating via email. The source did not know of any such concerns. Confirmation of the interview and document request is the first public indication that the agency is moving ahead with its inquiry and possibly expanding. This cannot be good news for Democrats because, as you remember, at the Democrat debate, you had and I believe that one was on CNN with Wolf Blitzer and some others. They basically circled the wagons around Hillary. You even had Bernie Sanders say, "Hey, look, I'm not going to go after Hillary on the email scandal." And Bernie Sanders is missing the point. It isn't your job to cover up for your fellow Democrat. It is your job as a candidate to express to the voters why you have a superior approach, or you have a better resume, or you have better ideas and a policy plan than your competitor. But there are also times when it is your duty to expose their record. And this is part of Hillary's record. This is not a personal scandal. This is not something to do with her personal life. This has to do with her professional life. This is absolutely relevant to how she conducted herself and how she viewed her duties and the sort of judgment that she exercised in the heat of being Secretary of State. Being Secretary of State is not easy. It's a high level position with tremendous amounts of scrutiny and tremendous amounts of pressure. And this is how she performed. And now you have what looks like an expanding FBI investigation. And Democrats could have a serious problem on their hands. Because look, if Joe Biden doesn't get in the race, and we're going to play you a clip from Joe Biden in the next segment that's it's going to blow your mind a little bit. But if Joe Biden's not in the race, you're left with a self-avowed socialist. Now, there's nothing wrong with a self-avowed socialist running for president, because we've had many, many socialists run for president. They just lie about it. They pretend they're mainstream. They pretend they're run-of-the-mill Democrats, when in fact they are hardcore leftists like Bernie Sanders. If the Democrats lose Hillary because she's going off to jail, or if there's some sort of a plea bargain that is entered into that is so severe, obviously she wouldn't be running for president anymore. So what do they have? And what if this happens after the primary? I think this raises some very, very interesting questions. If Bernie Sanders, now this is another interesting point. Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. So would he still be considered a viable third-party candidate? I don't know. Because he's running he's running in the Democrat primary, and I'm not sure how that works. He's being treated as if he's a Democrat, even though he doesn't belong to the Democrat Party. And in some places, they have very strict rules. In California, we've moved to the top two. So it essentially doesn't matter. Whoever the top two candidates are, they advance, and nobody else does. And if we ran the presidential election that way. So here's a crazy thought. Let's just say for a minute that we don't get the candidate we want in the GOP primary. Let's say that somehow, I hate to even say this, I don't want to jinx anything, but let's just say that somehow Jeb Bush pulls it out. And we have Jeb Don't Vote For Me Bush, who is now the GOP nominee. And you have Hillary on the Democrat side, and the investigation's not finished, which means it could erupt, it could explode, it could literally hijack and derail the presidential election. At that point, if you had a viable third-party candidate, if Donald Trump followed all the way through on his initial comment, I know he then later retracted it, you would potentially have a Donald Trump versus Jeb Bush presidential face-off in the general election. And wouldn't that be interesting? 323-746-TALK. We'll be talking about this. We'll have live debate coverage starting at 5 p.m. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial. So Joe Biden doesn't think that anyone should ever criticize the President of the United States. I don't know why he makes such strident, bizarre comments, but you got to hear his comment. Then I'm going to read you some of his previous comments from the past. Go ahead and roll it. This is vintage Joe Biden.
No one. There is no excuse. There should be no tolerance for referring to the President of the United States in derogatory terms. Period. 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 Period.
Okay. Let's roll that again, because I want you to get the full effect.
No one. There is no excuse. There should be no tolerance for referring to the President of the United States in derogatory terms. Period. 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 Period.
So, Joe Biden in 2007, when he kicked off his White House run by condescending to his current running mate, saying then Senator Barack Obama was the first mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice looking guy. I mean, how does he get away with saying that? That is so patently offensive that I can't even believe it. But of course, he's a Democrat. So Democrats can say whatever they want and they'll get a pass. It can be offensive. It can be racist. It can be stupid. It can be incredibly derogatory and derisive and all the things that Joe Biden said. So that's one thing he said. He further said he falsely boasted that Delaware was a slave state to explain why he would remain competitive in Southern primaries. You don't know my state. Delaware he said, my state was a slave state. My state is the 8th largest black population in the country. The nation's first black governor, Virginia's Douglas Wilder, recently blasted Biden for engaging in racially charged rhetoric, where he said, slavery is nothing to joke about. This is Joe Biden. And the history of this nation's involvement with slavery is nothing to pass off in a joke. Well, can we play that clip one more time of Joe Biden? Sorry, I'm abusing our chief engineer here because it's just too good. He found this clip, and it's a priceless Joe Bidenism.
No one. There is no excuse. There should be no tolerance for referring to the President of the United States in derogatory terms. Period. 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 Period.
In 2006, the same Joe Biden said you cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking. That is his exact quote. And on and on and on it goes with Joe Biden. But not to be outdone, we've got good old mainstream establishment candidate Hillary Clinton, who is the fave of the establishment media. And the media has repeatedly hammered Republican candidates for not rebuking questioners at campaign events who say things that progressives don't like. Their reluctance to immediately halt public appearances when unknown people say comments about President Obama's religious belief have been portrayed for days in the media as tacit acquiescence, or at least the willful indulgence of supposed hatred and bigotry. So when conservatives are holding an event and somebody says something stupid or out of line, and they don't shut down the entire event and arrest the person or take them to task or correct the record, the media just assumes that the conservative candidate and all conservatives simply agree with everything. And then along comes Hillary. Now comes a beautiful opportunity for the media to prove they are not shameless partisan hacks. On Tuesday, a male supporter at Hillary Clinton's town hall event in Derry, New Hampshire, declared that he wanted to throttle GOP 2016 candidate Carly Fiorina. Every time I see her on TV, I want to reach through and strangle her, said the man, who claimed to be a former employee of Hewlett-Packard during Fiorina's tenure as CEO. Clinton didn't merely ignore this comment. She laughed and delightedly exclaimed, "I wouldn't mess with you." And I believe we have a clip. I don't know if you've got that one ready, Sean, but I'd love to hear that.
She says she's a great CEO. Every time I see her on TV, I want to reach through and strangle her. I know that doesn't sound very nice, but... And I
wouldn't mess with you.
Wow. Let's play that again. I wouldn't mess with you. That's what Hillary said.
CEO. Every time I see her on TV, I want to reach through and strangle her. I know that doesn't sound very nice, but... And I
wouldn't mess with you.
I wouldn't mess with you. Not only does she not condemn him, she basically laughs and encourages everyone to think that that's an acceptable thought or an acceptable feeling. It is certainly nothing like how the media would react if this were a conservative. Do you remember when they had the tragic shooting of Gabrielle Giffords, Congresswoman from Arizona, and you had Sarah Palin on television who made a comment? Actually, she had nothing to do with it, but they're blaming Sarah Palin's rhetoric for the shooting in Arizona because she said something about putting the crosshairs on some political policy or candidates or what have you, which is a very frequent way of talking in politics, by the way, putting something in the crosshairs, going after it. Campaigns are discussed in the language of war because, as a matter of fact, when you wage war, it is called a campaign. So obviously there's going to be some similarity in terms of the language used, but the media has this incredible double standard. It doesn't matter whether it's Joe Biden, vice president now, who makes the most horrific racial comments that literally reveal his latent racism. Media completely ignores it. Joe Biden goes out there and makes comment yesterday, under no circumstances should we tolerate anyone making derogatory comments about the president. Does the media bring up his comments? No. They will always bring up comments of someone else. They'll lay them at the feet of the Tea Party. They'll lay them at the feet of George Bush. They'll lay them at the feet of the Republican Party. But they'll never deal with their own. And yet, after a while, you just lose all credibility. And when Hillary is out there allowing this, not only allowing it, but tolerating, encouraging this violent language instead of lecturing her supporter on his unacceptable words and reminding him about the war on women. We will have Adele Nazarian when we come back, and we're going to be talking about political correctness run amok on our college campuses. Stay tuned. It's called the Ferguson effect, or at least maybe that's a name given by its author, who is Adele Nazarian, Breitbart.com columnist. Adele, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Tim.
It's great to have you on.
How are you?
I am doing fantastic, and I'm fascinated by what you're calling the Ferguson effect. It's now spreading to campuses all over the country, even here to USC, where they're going to be voting on a diversity resolution. What's going on?
It all started in Ferguson, Missouri last year with the shooting death of Michael Brown, the whole hands of don't shoot dialogue that was quickly, dismantled as it was discovered that Michael Brown actually had attacked a police officer who did not face charges for the death. So what's going on is a lot of campuses, as we know, the university system in general is very liberal by default and by nature. But Black Lives Matter has really taken over in many campuses as it relates to the implementation of and introduction of different resolutions tonight at USC, they're going to be voting on a resolution to create more of an era of inclusion for minorities and to create more diversity on campuses, on campus. And it includes, having racial theory classes, a dean of diversity, things like that. And this whole entire movement basically started with about a month ago when the president of the USC Student Senate, who was an Indian woman, Indian ethnically, she had a racial slur about her Indian ethnicity thrown at her by a drunk male fraternity frat bro, so to speak. So, many on campus that I spoke with saw it as an isolated incident. Others, however, suggested that, there was, as a result of that and other isolated incidents, an era of, racism and that had to be dealt with by appropriating $100 million, which is what we're trying to vote on tonight, to go towards the implementation of these classes. So it's called the Ferguson effect because, it's happening at USC, at the University of Missouri, as you heard, I'm sure, yesterday. The chancellor and the president of the school basically capitulated and both resigned after students that are part of the Black Lives Matter movement went ahead and blamed them for a lack of responsiveness to certain incidences of, racism that occurred on campus.
Yeah,
so
I'm observing. We covered this yesterday. We covered this yesterday, and we tried to figure out what happened during this parade, and evidently a group of students who were protesting were trying to educate the president by disrupting the homecoming parade, and in the end, all they did is tick off everyone. That nobody was won over to their cause, and unfortunately, there seems to be a complete lack of any discernible incident where the school had behaved in an egregious manner. There were a couple of racial incidents on campus. The school acted in an appropriate manner. So when the president Tim Wolf resigned, it's almost like capitulation, because you can't fight this kind of a battle, because if you fight it, you essentially lose before you're even out of the gate, because you're labeled a racist. They wanted the president of the University of Missouri to admit his white privilege.
Yes, and really there was no other grounds with which they could call for his resignation. He really hadn't done anything wrong, except for the fact that he caved. He did, as you meant, capitulate. And one of my colleagues said it really well. He basically said, Wolf's capitulation is basically a display of an elder generation of liberals who are realizing that they must, in a sense, be sacrificed on the pagan altar of the new. So it's very interesting to hear, right? It's a very funny line. Unfortunately, it's true. And part of it is because the left will basically politicize everything, including sports. And that's what happened at University of Missouri, where, even the football team, became a political, symbol for what was happening throughout the country. And there's a reason why, for example, ESPN has lost so many ratings recently. It's because they've also become very politicized.
Yeah.
So it's a great part of it.
This political correctness is literally strangling our country now. Because if you think about it, a college campus is not a place where you go to feel good. It's a place where you go to learn. It's a place where you go to challenge yourself. It's a place where you go to grow intellectually, socially, emotionally, and everything else, right? You're supposed to interact with people from all over the world, different cultures, right?
Exactly. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And yet the battleground of ideas is no longer a battleground of ideas, because they've closed the battleground. It's like you're not allowed to be white anymore. You're not allowed to be American anymore. You're not allowed to be to have sort of a competitive winning attitude anymore. And you know, when you talk to people who have overcome incredible obstacles to become incredibly successful, I'm sure if you sat Dr. Ben Carson down, who he has been black his entire life, not just as a neurosurgeon, I'm sure that he came up against racism. I'm sure that he was treated in ways that could only be described as ugly and despicable at times in his life. And yet you don't see him going out and starting a movement to shut down all debate, all conversation, create what they call, what's this, inclusion climate on the campus?
Yes, a climate of inclusion. It's very interesting, drawing back to your comment about white supremacists and all this stuff, the whole white man basically being the target of these resolutions and all these things. One of the students at the last meeting, which took place on October 27th, said that all of our textbooks are written by white men, old white men. That's what one of the students said at the student council meeting. So complaining that even the authors of the textbook were white. So that's how far it's gone. So you can't even be right. You can't be white and write a textbook for college anymore. Not really the time.
Yeah. You know, I have a picture of myself when I was a young man, and I was actually going to University of California, Irvine. And at the time, the big debate of the day was whether or not they should use affirmative action quotas to keep Asians out of the school because there were not enough blacks and Hispanics taking advantage of college, and they wanted to increase those numbers, and they wanted to do it at the expense, in particular, of Asians, because Asians dominated the campus. They did extremely well in school and on tests, and they were reflected in the student body. And, you know, I remember hearing that debate on campus and thinking how ludicrous it was in the United States of America that anything but your merit, because that's how I got there. I got there by working hard. My only white privilege was this white VW Bug that I bought, and it actually was light blue when I bought it, and I paid a guy $200 to paint it, and he went to Ace Hardware and got some spray cans and sprayed it and everything in it just before I drove to California. But that was it. That's what I came out here with. That and a couple $100 in my pocket.
Wow.
You know, and everybody has a story like that. This whole myth of white privilege, it might apply if you took the white out of it, said privilege, and talked about people who grew up with $1 billion or more of net worth. I can understand that. And you could say, clearly, they had advantages none of us will ever have. But when you trace it to the color of somebody's skin, rather than looking at their unique circumstances and background and what they've overcome to get where they are, you'll never understand who they are as an individual.
You're absolutely correct. And it's very interesting because of, the variety of students that I spoke with, both in favor and opposed to this resolution. A lot of students said they think this resolution will only cause further divisions that perhaps didn't even exist before. And one of the things that I had presented as an idea was, is it possible that perhaps this, these new classes and this new curriculum, so to speak, is a way to silence any kind of opposition to, let's say, kind of silence people from expressing themselves outside of the classroom, like kind of keeping everything inside and making it like a faux pas to come out against, let's say, the Black Lives Matter movement, or to speak out against these sort of movements by ingraining it in the student population that, no, you have to accept this. And if you don't accept that, diversity exists, you're a racist.
Let me flip it on its head. If the universities were banning words or banning criticism of the Tea Party, the entire left-wing media would go crazy. But they regularly ban words. You're not allowed to use the word illegal alien anymore on most college campuses. You're not allowed to talk about almost anything in reality. And so if you can't talk about reality as it is, then you will be divorced from reality. And what are you actually learning then? And what is the construct in which you are learning if it is not reality based?
Very true. But it's also partly, in large part, the Republicans are also to blame because they're not standing up, they're not standing strongly enough in the face of this. They have to be able to face a shakedown and label a shakedown with equal fervor for what it is, and to stand against this really brutal narrative that is coming from the left. They're such experts. It's so funny because the left kind of likes to label the right as being warmongers, but if you really think about it and go down to the root of all these things, the real issues, they're the ones who are really waging a war on everything that doesn't really comply and pander to their own narrative. So it's kind of a hypocrisy, in my opinion, from what I've seen.
Yes, the politically correct strangling of debate. Yeah. And it has strangled. It has strangled reality in our times, political realities. Hey, I know that you. We're talking with Adele Nazarian. I know that you are en route right now to USC to witness this, and we will continue. By the way, go to Breitbart.com and look up Adele Nazarian, The Ferguson Effect. It's a great article. Adele, good luck with that. Thank you for coming on and sharing with us your take on this.
Thank you. The story will be published tonight, so keep an eye out.
Yes, we will.
I'll speak with you soon.
Okay. Definitely check it out. You want to get the rest of the story. And we will take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of the Tim Donnelly Show. You heard it here. Political correctness run amok. It is all over our college campuses. And, this is going to have a real effect on the next generation. Because what you and I might look at and laugh at and say, this is ludicrous, this is insane, this is the kind of stuff in books about the future, about thought control, about the thought police, about literally infiltrating a country and taking over their institutions and then brainwashing the youth and the future generations to accept things that the previous generation and generation before that the fathers and forefathers and grandfathers fought against. Introducing socialism and communism into a country that fought wars to overthrow those systems elsewhere. Think about that. That's what we're dealing with. This is not just some silly little thing that's happening on college campuses. It started with this Occupy movement and morphed into the Black Lives Matter movement. And what happens is you use race to silence dissent. And then anything goes. And as you can see, this tiny little activist group, a group that would have been put down. I mean, even, let's look at history. There was what was called the free speech movement at the University of California, Berkeley. And it started during the tenure of Jerry Brown's father, Pat Brown. There was a guy named Savio, Mario Savio, who was this incredibly articulate student leader who stood up and put his fist in the air, and pretty soon everybody was following him, and whatever he said went. And they were doing sit-ins and shut-ins and just disrupting the college. And it was fascinating because back then it didn't really matter if you were a Republican or a Democrat. There was enough respect for law and order. And I'm not talking about the cops. I'm talking about law, being ruled by law. It's kind of like saying you go to a sporting event whether it's a professional game or it's a Little League game or a Pop Warner football game, and you agree to be ruled by the laws of the game, that means you control yourself. That means when it doesn't go your way, you don't beat somebody up, you don't punch the ref, you don't cuss out someone in authority. You just maintain your emotions and you learn to live within the laws. Now you don't have to like it. You can be rebelling against it by trying to change something on the field. But what happened at Berkeley is the student rebellions were put down by authorities, by Democrat administration, in the name of allowing the other students to be able to go to school because they paid for it. Their parents had put out hard-earned cash. They had a right to go to class. Not anymore. And we'll be right back with more. So don't go anywhere. You might be shocked if you are a California native in your 20s or early 30s, the state owns your DNA. Yeah, surprise, surprise. In this day and age, to think that the government could have control over your DNA information. Every year, for about 4 million newborns in the United States, get a heel prick at birth to screen for congenital disorders that, if found early enough, can save their life. Danielle Gatto barely remembers the nurse even mentioning tests performed on her 2 daughters. I don't think that any woman is in a state of mind to sit down and start studying up on the literature they send you home with just after birth. But later, she was shocked to find that her daughter's leftover blood was not thrown away. The state collects the cards and then uses them in a database. The information is buried on page 12 of the brochure about newborn screening program that hospitals give parents of newborns before they go home. Turns out a nondescript building in Richmond, California contains the DNA of every person born in California since 1983. It's a treasure trove of information about you, from the color of your eyes and hair to your predisposition for diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer. Using these newborn blood spots for research, the state is able to screen babies for 80 hereditary diseases, but the California Department of Health is not the only agency using the blood spots. Law enforcement can request them. Private companies can buy them to do research without your consent, by the way. Everybody has a right to make an informed decision. That is not for the state to decide for them. And of course, the department turned down a request for an interview, won't explain why it doesn't ask permission to sell babies' blood spots, but it said the parents can have them destroyed. And the department says the blood spots are de-identified and cannot be tracked back to the child. Somehow, I don't know. I think that's asking us to trust the government a little bit too much. That's not something I'm comfortable with. I don't know about you. 323-746-TALK. Is anybody out there aware that this was happening? Did anyone actually read the fine print when they had a baby and discovered that the government was taking DNA information to use in this way? Because I don't remember that. And we've had 3 children here in the state of California since those dates. And it certainly was never anything I was aware of. And I was pretty comprehensive at reading stuff. But you'd think that would be on the front page, not buried on page 12. 323-746-TALK. I'm curious if any of you were aware that the government could take your DNA and sell it, use it, give it to law enforcement. Why would they give your DNA to law enforcement and not be able to track it back to you? See, that seems to me like they've been caught in a lie right there. And this is, every time you turn around, you got the government doing something it shouldn't be doing, and then you have to pass another law to constrain the power of the government. I swear, we do need some more laws. I always was one of those people who said we don't need a single more law. But the laws we need are not to control us and restrain and restrict our freedom, but to control the government and restrict their freedom. Because this is ludicrous. Why in the world would we allow the government to take DNA from our children? You know, one of the things, I get this modern science that somehow you're able to see if somebody's going to have a disease or this or that. I don't want to know. If there's nothing I can do, I don't want to know. And I don't want to know the day that I'm going to die. I think that there's some things you leave alone. To me, that's in God's hand. And whether that's tomorrow or 100, 10 years from now or 20 years from now or 30 years from now, I don't want to know. And I certainly don't want the government to know. Think of all the malfeasance they could get up to by taking the DNA of your kids. No wonder they want to be in charge of the entire healthcare system. This is Kafkaesque 1984 Orwellian government run amok here in California in 2015. I can't believe there's nobody out there. Come on, 323-746-8255. There's got to be somebody who read the fine print when they took their child home from the hospital and found out that the government has the right to take your child's DNA from their blood and run all kinds of tests on it, keep it in some building in Richmond, and give it out to the cops and sell it to third parties without your consent. There's got to be somebody. If there is, call in, because I would like to know. And if you did see that, I'd like to know what you think about it. 323-746-TALK is our number. You know, this is one of those issues that gets really deep into whether or not you value your privacy and whether or not you want the government to have absolute control over every aspect of your life. And I think this is the sort of thing that we ought to be seeing some of these candidates bringing up in these debates, because these are issues that I think you could get a whole lot of people who are not even political to actually care about. Let me go to the phones here and see what you're thinking. Hey, welcome to the show.
Hi, my name's Andrew from Victorville. And
hey, Andrew, how are you?
Oh, could be better, could be worse. Can't complain. The radio section I was listening to was talking about the DNA being taken, and I had my DNA taken as a kid when I committed a crime. After I got out and got finished with parole and everything, I asked for my DNA back, and they said they were just keeping it for records.
Yep.
And it was, and you know, at that time I didn't have a whole lot of knowledge about my rights and stuff, and it was a trip. But they have a record of every person in the state of California that's been in jail. I think I had a violent crime as a kid. I made some stupid choices and stuff. But they kept a backlog of everybody's DNA that was in there. Like, what the heck is that about?
Well, you'd be surprised, Andrew, because they don't just keep it. They actually use that DNA to study and predict whether or not you're going to commit future crimes. They've used it in all kinds of experiments. And I actually was involved in a bill that would restrict their usage to strictly criminal-related activities, which makes a certain amount of sense, but not to go study and analyze and do all kinds of things without your consent. Because the bottom line is that unless you give the government consent to do something with your medical data, they shouldn't be doing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Andrew, thanks.
But
thanks for
the age of privacy. The age of privacy has all but just been phased out. Anywhere you go now, you got to give up. You know, they want your social for this, the last 4 numbers for a phone. You know, it's and the first thing you read on the back of your social is that it's not supposed to be used for identification purposes. It's just it's a backwards thinking age now, and what's really sad is that our young is being impressioned so effectively by the idiots on the left that they have no sense of history to show how their behavior is contrary to success and a fruitful life. You know, the greatest country in the world, and they're ruining it.
Yeah, Andrew, I couldn't have said it better. And look, there you have no right to privacy anymore. The government is spying on you at every second. They're using private companies like Google and Facebook. They're using your phone company like AT&T and Verizon and all these monolithic companies. They're all in bed together. So the bottom line is we don't have any privacy anymore. And it's time that we start taking back that domain, because this is out of control. And I don't want to live in a country.
They might have let us. We might still have privacy in the bathroom.
Well, good luck with that.
And that's about it.
I hope you're right. I got to take a quick break here, Andrew, but thanks for the call. Hey, we will be right back with more of your calls. 323-746-TALK. It's fight night in Milwaukee as GOP candidates are about to debate. The undercard is, I assume, underway, but one of the big issues that's starting to come back up is this Obama trade. And you're talking about something that is 30,000 pages long. No wonder they didn't want anyone to read. I don't even know how anyone could read 30,000 pages in any sort of a timely fashion in order to register a vote on it. Anytime something was uncertain or unknown, I just voted no. My default vote is a no. You've got to win me over to get a yes. And you're going to see candidates now making this an issue, because there are some candidates who are in favor of the TP. It's called the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Donald Trump vehemently against it. You've got Dr. Ben Carson, who is sort of saying he's open to it. The non-politician being somewhat political in not quite wanting to take a stance. But that's a big issue when you have American jobs being lost every day to foreigners who are coming in with HB1 visas. That cropped up as a big issue between Donald Trump and Marco Rubio. And this Trans-Pacific Partnership gives foreign governments sovereignty over U.S. businesses in some cases through contract. It's a very arcane and obtuse thing, but the bottom line is this is a massive trade deal. We've already seen, we had Curtis Ellis on from ObamaTrade.com talking about how they're already adding in new countries that were not approved previously. That were not even part of the whole deal. That were not part of the negotiation. They're just being morphed in at the end. This is a disastrous way to engage in foreign policy. And anybody who's up there endorsing what Obama is doing, knowing that it has these major issues. We're not talking about opposing something because Obama did it. I've never been in favor of that. If somebody has a good idea and they're my political nemesis. I'm going to embrace the good idea. I'm going to give them a pass on going to war with them on that one issue. I may even join them if it's a good enough proposal. I may join them and co-author it and push for it, because in the end, it's about principle and it's about standing up for what's right. But if Dr. Ben Carson stands up with Obama in favor of this Trans-Pacific trade deal, what's called Obama trade, you've already got Jeb Bush and John Kasich who support it, so that ought to tell you right there it's a bad idea. Senator Ted Cruz and Rand Paul voted against it. See, you look for all these little touch points. You look for where people come down on particular issues sometimes when you don't have the time or the resources to go through the whole issue. But a big part of the concern is the way that the trade deal was brought about, and the way that it is being negotiated, and the way that the rules that were agreed to, the whole process, where the Congress doesn't have the ability to come in and essentially oppose a particular provision of the trade and say, hey, wait a minute, we've got a big issue with this. See, if you did that, you could get some Republicans, you could get some Democrats, especially if it's an issue revolving around labor, or if it's an issue revolving around business regulations. You're able to cobble together some coalitions that are going to raise some principled objections. But what they're forcing you to do is throw out the entire deal. And nobody ever wants to do that, because they say, oh, we've invested so much time and effort and so much work and so much this and so much that. And in the end, they wind up accepting a horrible deal, but you can't get enough people to effectively oppose it because you can't go after the individual provisions. And that's no way to make policy. It just, I'm hoping, given the format tonight, I'm actually hoping they'll get into this, because I haven't heard any real discussion about this. And given that it's going to be on a business channel, Fox Business News, and you've got Fox Business News wants to make a name for themselves now, because CNBC walked away with a bloody nose and two black eyes. And so you've got Maria Bartiromo and Neil Cavuto, who are anxious to come off as fair, even-handed. You're even going to have the Wall Street Journal's Gerard Baker, and mind you, just in case you're wondering, the Wall Street Journal, even though it's a business publication, tends to be very leftist in nature. They favor full-fledged amnesty for illegals, and they have always favored that and pushed for that. It's always astonishing to me how people who are in the top 1% with a straight face can push for something like amnesty that crushes the wages of the middle class and the low-income worker in the United States. Because bottom line is you've rigged the labor market against labor. And I'm not talking about unions. I'm talking about just ordinary Americans who work for a living. I'm talking about small contractors, because when you bring in people illegally, hey, nobody enforces any of the rules. And the bottom line is the law-abiding suffer. And I think it's going to be a better debate in a lot of ways, because maybe we'll hear what they actually think for a change. 323-746-TALK. We're going to have Michelle Moons back on, talking more on the Jerry Brown scandal. Don't look back, but Jerry Brown is in trouble. And it's getting worse. We brought you the story the other day. It was broken by the AP, and then further investigation by Breitbart.com, the news team over there, including Michelle Moons. Michelle, welcome back to the show. What's the latest?
Hi, Tim. We've been following this story and talking to elected officials and people running for office, someone like yourself earlier today, to get perspective on this. And what came out today in the AP, because they're the ones that originally broke this story, is now they have located a whistleblower that came out saying that she's a mapping specialist for the Department of Conservation. And she said she feels like she's being, sort of her position is being threatened, hence the being a whistleblower, but that she was asked to prepare ordered to prepare a state map of oil and gas potential, history and geology. This is what the AP report says. Potential history and geology of Jerry Brown's family ranch. And this is what she and her attorney are now saying as well. And so she was contacted. Her name is Jenny Catalano. She was contacted and did confirm that she is a whistleblower. Won't comment further.
And she is a mapping.
And you've got
she's a mapping specialist for the California Department of Conservation. And she stated that, didn't she, that she's facing retaliation? Years. Yeah. She's been there 18 years. She's facing some retaliation after complaining for having to do personal work for Jerry Brown.
Right. And so then the question has been, well, the agency has said, well, we're coming up with examples, and the AP published the story before we got a chance to get those examples to them. Well, now the AP is coming back saying, okay, well, since we published our report and you've been questioning whether this is valid or was it as bad as the AP made it sound. But now the AP is saying, well, yeah, now we've gotten these 3 reports that are supposedly similar to Jerry Brown's request and what they prepared for Jerry Brown. 2 of them are not private individuals, so it's not comparable. And the third one is an undisclosed private individual, but it was something like 9 pages of report. It's not the 51-page report with geological information. All kinds of work went into this 51-page report from what they can tell. It's over and above. So they've got about 7 individuals, 4 oil industry professionals and 3 former officials with the state that are now saying their breadth of experience ranges from the 1980s and forward. And what these 3 former officials are saying is, we worked there, some of them back to the 1980s. They've never seen this kind of work done for a private individual. Yes, you have access. Everybody has access to these records. And yes, Jerry Brown's office has said, well, everyone has access. Yes, but not everyone's getting a 51-page analysis, geographical or geological information on the drilling potential of their property. It's over and above Jerry Brown's family's property, family ranch.
Yeah, it's
over and above what they've seen over 30 years.
Yeah, it smacks of preferential treatment. It smacks of an abuse of power. Because look, if the governor is the guy who hires you and can fire you, you're going to do what he says. And so you have this new guy, Steve Bolin, who came on board. He was immediately asked to produce this document. Then one of Brown's staffers followed up with him. So within 24 hours, they produced this report.
Sure.
And I was talking to Assemblywoman. I was talking to Assemblywoman Shannon Grove yesterday, and she stated that there are companies in the oil industry who create jobs and produce revenues in the state of California who are waiting years for reports and permits, not 24 hours, not days, not weeks, not months, years.
No. Yes, and they turned around Brown's report very quickly. 51-page report, in-depth report that they haven't seen any other private individual receive quite such, or not even near such in-depth analysis. The best example, the only private individual example that the state could give was one individual that got something like a 9-page report. That's not comparable. And it wasn't the same type of report. I mean, we're talking about something that is not nearly in depth. They said sometimes we'll provide these former officials say sometimes we would provide, maybe if somebody needed help, a couple of extra pages, but not a 51-page report. It is the over and above use of state resources for his own personal private property, his family's property.
Sure. And one of my concerns here is not only the violation of that law or that rule, which is that you cannot use state resources for personal gain, but this whistleblower talking about and alleging retaliation. Was Brown in any way involved in a cover-up? Was he trying to cover it up? Was he trying to keep it quiet? I'm asking the question. I'm not alleging that this has happened, but I'm saying it certainly is a pattern when somebody does something, and a lot of times the cover-up and the cover-up activity is worse than the crime itself.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we look back at, let's go back to Clinton. I mean, what was one of the bigger issues with that is the cover-up and the lying. I mean, that was ultimately what was one of the bigger problems. And so now we're looking, and it is a question. It's not a direct accusation of any sort, but the question does have to be asked because this mapping specialist, Jenny Catalano, she did confirm that she is a whistleblower, wouldn't make further comment to the Associated Press, but it does say that she lodged the complaint, the whistleblower claim, in relation to this, and that there is some potential that she feels like her job could be or she could face unspecified retaliation because of being suspected of lodging the complaint against Brown. And that's what she and her attorney are saying. Now, of course, if she's looking at things, she's got an attorney, so she's got things to consider of what she can and can't say. I'm assuming that her attorney is very much directing that. But it hasn't been refuted that there wasn't this. I mean, there is question to whether this Bolin, whether his emails, he's being warned not to, or to be careful about emailing about this. So
that was strange. I read that I read in your story at Breitbart.com that you guys have been working on this as a team, even though it's published under Joel Pollak's name. It's oil scandal whistleblower emerges against Jerry Brown. That he hand delivered the report instead of emailing.
Isn't that interesting?
It's like, okay, we want to keep this under the radar.
This even came up because of a lawsuit in Kern County. It wasn't even related, but that's how this came to light. Is the state research on the ranch came up because farmers in Kern County, and it had to do with circumvention of federal law to protect groundwater from oil field pollution. It wasn't related directly to this, but that's how this even came up. It really makes you wonder what else is out there. But here's something we do have, and the question needs to be asked: were there other threats, or what do we need to question as far as what people could face as backlash? Not to mention the fact that he did, there is question as to whether he misappropriated resources and that he's getting this special treatment because he's the governor. Well, that should not be the case. I mean, it should be the same as any other private individual, and this is not what private individuals are getting. Even you're talking about the oil industry professionals. They don't get that kind of service. Here's Jerry Brown working to put out their green this, green that, cap and trade. Oh yeah, all greeny. And then we find out he wants to find out if he can, it appears as though he's looking to find out whether there is possibility to drill on this private property.
Yeah, and Brown is claiming that his interest was in the history and the geology of his family's land. But Associated Press is contending that he was primarily interested in its oil and gas potential, which is backed up by the 51-page report, because he wouldn't need 51 pages to figure out the history and geology of his family's land. He could have had a 3-page report on that.
Right.
And he could have paid for it, privately and had it done privately. This really gets to the heart of one of the biggest problems in California, which is we have a government that is horribly corrupt. There's another story I saw at Breitbart that California gets a C for public integrity. I'm surprised we're that high. And there needs to be a full investigation. But the question, go ahead.
Can we also bring up the question that there have been attempted subpoenas, and the State Attorney General's office, Kamala Harris, has refuted those. The State Attorney General's office has refused these subpoenas to do for the oil and gas professionals or the agency employees. And so here you have the State Attorney General's office saying, well, the law firm subpoenas for oil and gas agency employees, we're not going to honor those, or we're going to contest them. We don't want to honor these subpoenas. Well, I mean, in my experience, you get a subpoena, okay, you have to go and appear in court. Why don't they want these individuals to appear in court on this issue?
Well, and that goes back
really
to the exact question I was going to ask. So, given how corrupt, clearly, the Attorney General's office seems to be, or highly politicized, where do you go to get an investigation done? Who would investigate the allegations of corruption here and possible cover up and who does it go to? Does it go to California Department of Justice? Does it go to the FBI? Does it go out of the state of California? What do we do here?
Well, I mean, we've already got the answer that the Attorney General's office, where they stand on this. They don't want to honor subpoenas, or they want to contest them. They want to push back. And if that's the case, then it really does make you wonder why. I mean, anytime you have something like that where people don't want transparency in government, you got to ask, why wouldn't they want transparency? That's what we're about. I mean, that's what the public should expect, unless there is some huge national security issue or something to hide, right?
Something to hide.
But even then, the public should expect transparency, and we're not seeing that. In fact, the State Attorney General's office should be paramount in providing transparency in our government, and they're clearly not.
Well,
it appears that they're clearly not.
You'd think if Kamala Harris really wanted to be the next governor of California, which some people have said maybe she does, even though she's going off to become senator, whatever role she wants to play, she could certainly be a real leader here in standing up against corruption. But, of course, it's a Democrat, so they just shield him. But Michelle Moons, we're out of time. Thank you for coming on. Michelle Moons, Breitbart columnist, investigative journalist, and friend of the Tim Donnelly Show.
Thanks, Tim.
We'll talk to you again soon, and we will be right back. And we'll have live coverage of the 4th GOP debate starting at 5:06 p.m. You know, the politically correct theme also, it's intrinsically linked to corruption, because when you have a media that cannot cover the truth, that cannot actually speak the truth about more than half of the politicians because they agree with their ideology, that leads to the corruption where they will always give their guy a pass. And we're watching it. And now, even though AP broke this, we're going to see if this story really, truly gets investigated. And we will be at the forefront, keeping an eye on it and pushing along and inquiring and finding out, A, who's going to investigate it, B, because who is? If you've got the Attorney General in your pocket because she doesn't want to tick you off because she needs your donors and you've got $25 million in your political campaign account, which would be immensely helpful, she's not going to go out and embarrass you. So we have an Attorney General who will not do her job because she's running for Senate because she wants boxer seat. Okay. So where do we go next? We've got the California Department of Justice. We've got the FBI, which is a federal agency. Of course, this is a state matter. Does maybe the sheriff in the county in which it happened? But then again, every time you turn around, there's some obstacle to the right thing being done. But the bottom line is, Jerry Brown doesn't get to get away with breaking the law. If he does, then why shouldn't everyone else? I thought we were all equal under the law. That's one of the things that separates us from a banana republic. That's one of the things that is amazing about the country in which we live. This is a constitutional republic founded on the rule of law. And we're watching political correctness, and we're watching corruption undermine that. And that same political correctness that so many political candidates now want a mass amnesty, they want to open the border, they want to completely erase any semblance of a constitutional republic and undermine the very foundations thereof. Hey, stay tuned. We're going to join the GOP debate number 4 in progress when we return.
And keep your hands to yourself.
And that is what they are hoping will happen, that people will keep their hands to themselves. Good luck with that. We are talking about the GOP debate, and we're going to listen in a little bit to the undercard debate, because evidently with daylight savings time, the main debate is going to be starting later than we had previously thought. So let's go ahead and see what they're talking about. I believe Mike Huckabee may have been speaking.
Within the veterans community, where we can develop centers of excellence and replace the VA with a group of centers of excellence that can help our folks who come back from the
Senator Santorum, thank you. I have a question for all of you. Americans' connection to the military has been increasingly fading. As a society, how do we restore that sense of duty, that sense of pride that was the hallmark of the greatest generation? Again, I'd like to ask each of you 30 seconds each, beginning with Governor Jindal.
Well, a couple of things. First, I want to echo what others have said and thank those veterans that have run towards danger, not away from it, so we can live in the greatest country in the history of the world. I think every veteran should get that card, and they should be allowed to get that health care wherever they want in the private sector, but I also think, or the public sector, I also think we need to fire some of these VA bureaucrats. Somebody should go to jail over these scandals, and it is a crime that has not happened. When it comes to uniting the American people, one of the things we have done to honor our veterans in Louisiana, we have given thousands, and I've hand-delivered these to veterans, medals to veterans, to thank them for their service. I'll just give you one quick example. I know my time is out, but we've had Vietnam War veterans with tears in their eyes saying nobody has ever thanked them before. We've had World War II veterans, children, who said they'd never heard the stories of their parents' heroic sacrifice. Whatever conflict, whenever they served, one of the things we can do is to teach our children. We do live in the greatest country in the history of the world. We've got a president who doesn't believe in American exceptionalism, but we still do, and it's because of those men and women in uniform. We should thank them every day, not just Veterans Day.
Governor Huckabee.
Well, I think thanking our veterans is a wonderful thing to do, but they'd sure appreciate a better paycheck. They'd appreciate the fact that we kept our promises to them. The men and women in uniform put on the uniform of our nation. They went halfway around the world. They faced dangers on our behalf. And we promised them if they did that, when they came home, we'd take care of their medical care. We'd make it possible for their kids to go to college, and they'd be able to find a home. They kept their promises to us. We have not kept our promises to them. And today, less than 1% of Americans go to the military for service. We're fighting wars with other people's kids in large measure, because we've not taken seriously the moral, not the monetary, the moral obligation to take care of the veterans and to keep America's promise to the ones who kept their promise to America.
Governor Christie.
The way to reconnect Americans to the men and women in uniform is to first and foremost give them a commander-in-chief who respects the military and respects everyone who wears the uniform. It starts at the top, Trish. When Secretary Clinton says there's no crisis at the VA, that sends a long and hard message to our veterans that she doesn't get it and she doesn't respect their service. When the President of the United States doesn't back up law enforcement officers in uniform, he loses the moral authority to lead any man or woman who is in uniform. I spent 7 years in law enforcement. I respect these folks, and I will do so as Commander-in-Chief of the military.
Senator Santorum.
It should come as no surprise to Chris or anybody else that Barack Obama hasn't stood behind our men and women in uniform here at home, because he hasn't stood behind them overseas. The rules of engagement that we've allowed our soldiers to go and fight against have put them in harm's way for political purposes. This has been the most politicized wars that we've ever seen under this administration. He gets in and gets out based upon what the polls are saying and what pressure he's getting from groups. Talk about a commander-in-chief. We need a commander-in-chief who has a vision and plan of how we're going to execute the national security of our country. Commander-in-chief is not an entry-level position. Experience matters, and that's why I would ask for your support as a commander-in-chief, because I have the experience against the enemy that we confront to do the job.
Candidates, it's time for closing statements. 30 seconds. Governor Jindal, start with you.
You know, I've spent a lot of time tonight talking about the need to cut the size of government. The reason I'm doing that, it's not just about balancing the budget or a bunch of numbers. It's because I believe in the American dream. I think President Obama's done a lot of damage to our country. I think that one of the worst things he has done is try to change the idea of America to being one of dependence. There are a lot of politicians that talk about cutting government spending. I'm the only one that's actually done it that's running for president. The rest of them, it's a lot of hot air. If you want your paychecks to go up, if you want more good-paying jobs, if you want the government out of your lives, we've got to cut the size of government. It's not enough just to elect any Republican. We've seen that. We've got to elect a Republican that will take on the establishment in both parties. I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Senator Santorum.
I announced from a factory floor in Western Pennsylvania. This campaign has all been about two words for me: working families. Working. Getting people the opportunity to see those wages rise, to be on the side of the American workers so they can get good paying jobs. And that means we have to start making things in America again. We need a president who's going to not just put policies in place, but is going to stand up at the bully pulpit and talk about the dignity of being a welder, the dignity of being a carpenter, about going to work and earning success, and also the importance of families and fathers and mothers raising their children and committing to that, so they can give children and our country the best opportunities for success. Working families is the key for us to win this election.
Governor Huckabee.
In many ways, I feel like I'm the luckiest guy on earth. I really do. It's a long way from a little brick rent house on 2nd Street in Hope, Arkansas, to this stage where I'm running for President of the United States. It's not about me, not about these guys. It ought to be about you. And I've never been the favorite of the people who have the most money, but I want to be the favorite of the people who still want to believe the American dream can work for them. Today in our office, I got a letter from a 3rd grader in North Dakota. Her name is Reese. She sent $6 from her allowance and said, I want to help you be president. You know, I'm going to keep standing on this stage and keep fighting for one reason. Because somewhere out there in North Dakota and all over America, there are kids like Reese who need a president who will never forget where they came from. And I promise I won't.
Governor Christie.
I want to tell the American people who are watching tonight the truth. I saw the most disgraceful thing I've seen in this entire campaign a few weeks ago. Hillary Clinton was asked the enemy she's most proud of, and she said, Republicans. In a world where we have Al-Qaeda and ISIS, the mullahs in Iran, and Vladimir Putin, the woman who asks to run and represent all of the United States, says that her greatest enemies are people like you in this audience and us here. I will tell you one thing, and write this down. When you elect me President of the United States, I will go to Washington not only to fight the fights that need fighting, not only to say what I mean and mean what I say, but to bring this entire country together for a better future for our children and grandchildren.
Thank you, gentlemen. That does it, everyone, for the first debate here in Milwaukee. Just about 1 hour from now at 9 p.m. Eastern,
well, there you have
more
it.
Candidates are going to be taking to the stage.
That was the ending of the undercard debate. You got to hear the final comments, and I'm curious if any of you think any of them should actually be in the debate that starts at the top of the hour as soon as we go off air at 6 p.m. But look, I wanted to bring you something so you could have some semblance of what they're talking about. It's definitely much more low-key than what we have seen with these other debates. We'll go ahead and take a break and come back with your calls. 323-746-TALK. That's a good song for the undercard debate because, you know, you're on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody's working. By the time people start driving home, you're finishing up. And it must feel like that. You can't get any satisfaction. You can't make a difference. You can't be relevant because nobody's paying attention. And I do think there are decent candidates, even on the undercard, but when you have rock star candidates, then the decent candidates are going to get drowned out. And you've got Ben Carson, you've got Donald Trump, who have stolen the hearts of a huge percentage of the American people. And so it's going to be very interesting tonight. And I'm curious what you might think. 323-746-TALK if you want to call in. And if you're driving, that's 323-746-8255. What does Donald Trump and what does Dr. Ben Carson, what do they need to do? We know Carson has been demonized and criticized and vilified for supposedly being some big fat liar. You know, he's on the greatest stage in politics, which is really the world stage. He's a world-renowned neurosurgeon. He's someone who took on President Obama on Obamacare. He didn't take on President Obama on Black Lives Matter. He didn't take him on civil rights issues. He didn't take him on race relations. He took him on his field of expertise because he is an extremely accomplished neurosurgeon. That's who he is. And what's fascinating, the Democrats don't have anything. They don't have anyone to compete with Dr. Ben Carson. So I'm just curious. I wonder how he's going to handle this whole incident with the media going after his biography, calling him a liar. We had a journalist on yesterday talking about the blatant misrepresentations of his record, basically saying that because they sent a bunch of reporters on the ground, they sent investigators, and because they could not find any evidence of Dr. Ben Carson then being involved when he was 14 years old in this incident where he lunged at trying to stab his best friend, then it didn't happen. Ben Carson's a liar. Then they moved on to some story about supposedly he had said that he had applied and been offered a full scholarship to West Point, which he never said. He never said it. He never said he had applied, period. And for the media, and these are things that are very carefully selected, very simple stories to understand, that when you flesh them out, when you expose them, and when you put them in a headline, everybody gets it. And the narrative of the left, if you're just tuning in, is Dr. Ben Carson's a liar. Not Dr. Ben Carson, world-renowned neurosurgeon, but they believe they had found within his autobiography examples of him fabricating and lying, and this was evidence of character flaws. Only one problem. All it was is evidence of the media bias and the media attempting to make something out of nothing and literally inventing things out of whole cloth. Not even having any evidence. I mean, it'd be one thing if they had a story that was partially true. It's another thing when they just make it up. And it's got to be frustrating. And so I'm really going to be fascinated by how he handles this. Because, you know, if he goes at it too hard and comes out with both barrels, the only problem with that, a lot of people may not even know what he's talking about, because all they get is their news secondhand, and they weren't even aware that the media had made stuff up. So he's got to be sort of tongue-in-cheek in my estimation. He's got to definitely not follow Trump or follow Trump when he uses a one-liner, or probably better follow how Carly Fiorina handled the whole Trump thing. That's when she started going up in the polls, not down. So that'll be one thing to watch for. But the other thing is going to be, hey, do these guys actually have a plan? And now, look, they're not going to be able to whine about not getting time. There's fewer candidates on the stage. You're going to have, these are high stakes. Here's the dirty little secret about politics. The more time you have, the more time you have to screw up. If you're asked a question in a very tight time table where you have to give a short response, you're going to take your best material, you're going to put it out there, you're going to fire it off, and that'll be that. If you have twice the time or 3 times the amount of time, then what'll happen is you might wind up saying something you didn't intend to say. You might go off on some tangent because you didn't choreograph it right. So you really have to have that discipline, and you got to have a plan. You've got to have something to present. I believe it was Peggy Noonan, speechwriter for former President Ronald Reagan, who said every speech should have a major policy initiative. Look, this is the time. This is your moment. If you're not introducing major policy initiatives and you're a candidate who's behind, then you're a candidate who is missing your opportunity. Nobody wants to hear you stand up there and tell us everything that's wrong. We all know that. This is your 15 minutes of fame where you could come through, you could present something that nobody else is talking about and steal the stage, steal the thunder from Carson, Trump, and Cruz. But that's not my expectation. I don't think the candidates who are behind in the main debate, I just don't think they have the gumption. I don't think they have it in them. I think I just don't see it. I don't see the gravitas among the rest of the candidates to really steal that stage and make an impression and come out with some dramatic thing. But I could be wrong. We will have to keep our eye on the actual debate and see what happens. But I'm hoping that you'll see a little bit more Ted Cruz. Senator Ted Cruz is someone who came alive in the last debate. And I think you're going to see his star rise even further. And that'll be a good thing because the GOP needs more depth. Because the left and the left stream media is going to be gunning to take out Trump, they're already working to take out Carson. They think they've done their damage to Trump. But anyway, we will be right back after these messages. It's fight night for the GOP debate number 4. I'm curious who you like. 323-746-TALK. Last time we did this, we want your number 1 and number 2 pick. Last time we came up mostly with Trump Carson and a few Trump Cruz. And I'm curious if that has changed since the last debate because a lot has happened. And you've now got Dr. Ben Carson more and more in the headlines. He is leading in a number of polls. And it's, I think tonight is going to be anybody's night to shine because I'm going to say, let me rephrase that because I don't think it's going to. Tonight's format will not favor someone like Trump. It's going to favor the more thoughtful and articulate candidates who come in there with a plan to utilize the format to their advantage, especially if they have been sort of left behind. And you've got an ABC poll which shows Carson actually dead even with Trump. And there's Marco Rubio keeps popping up with a 58% favorability rating by Republicans. Ben Carson up there, along with Trump at 71% and 69% for Trump. I don't know where they come up with Bush at 53 and Cruz at, Bush at 56% and Cruz at 53. I don't know who it is who likes Jeb Bush. I mean, I'll put it out there. If you're a Jeb Bush supporter, give us a call because we would love to hear from you. We would love to know the magic of Jeb, don't vote for me, Bush. I mean, I think he stole that line from what's his face, the ever forgettable Lindsey, don't vote for me, Graham. And
don't vote for me.
Yeah, let's play that again.
Don't vote for me.
Yeah. Who says don't vote for me? You know they're going to use it in a line. You can't say that. It just doesn't work out if you're actually wanting to win. And Americans right now are drawn to the non-politicians. You guys are seeing it every day, and you're calling in here and talking about it, telling us about your conversations with your friends, and it's across the board. This is not something that is partisan in nature. We've had Republicans and Democrats call in. We've had people of all walks of life, rich, poor, young, old, every race, particularly including Hispanics. And a lot of pundits say the Hispanic vote is, first of all, they say it exists, and second of all, they say it's really important to win. And Donald Trump does really well with the Hispanic vote, which really pisses off the establishment because Jeb Bush isn't. I mean, Jeb Bush is doing well with Hispanic Democrats. Think about that. But Trump is doing better with Hispanic Republicans or conservatives or those who are up for grabs, which I would assume there's a lot of people up for grabs of every ethnicity. Because people are ticked off at Washington. They're ticked off at Washington, D.C. They're ticked off at President Obama. They're ticked off at the Democrats. They're ticked off at the Republicans. They want to see a government that actually works for the people. And Right now, the only voices that seem to have any authenticity, that seem to have any way of connecting with the electorate, are the ones who are outsiders. It's the outsiders are in and the insiders are out election season. At least it is right now. And I don't think that George Bush is going to be able to turn that around. I just don't see it. And it is interesting to look at the, as well as the unfavorable ratings. And this might surprise you. This is somewhat counterintuitive. You've got Ben Carson has the lowest unfavorable. You would think Donald Trump would have the highest. That slamming stuff around here on the Radio Free California Network desk. My take would be, look, when you're somebody who is that outspoken, that polarizing, he would be the one to draw the most unfavorable rating, but he isn't. You got Donald Trump at 29%. Marco Rubio is doing better than Trump in that department and doesn't quite eclipse Ben Carson. He's at 22%. But here's a shocker. Ted Cruz's unfavorable rating is higher than Donald Trump's at 31%. And then Jeb, it's all about love. Amnesty equals love. Bush, Jeb, don't vote for me, Bush, is at 37% unfavorable. That means 37% of those polled have an unfavorable rating in view of him. And only a very small number of people have no opinion of him at 7%. Only one lower is Donald Trump at 2%. So Donald Trump is in the catbird seat. Ben Carson is in the catbird seat. Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz have an opportunity. I think Jeb Bush, he's dead on arrival with those kind of numbers. His favorable rating with Republicans alone is way too low, and his unfavorable rating is way too high. And, of course, who's going to determine the Republican primary, but hopefully Republican voters? Now, stranger things have happened, and you can have the liberal elitist GOP establishment class who like to pick the weakest, most moderate, most liberal candidates on the planet. But I don't know if they can overcome this outgoing tide. There is just an outgoing tide that they got to fight against. Out is in is out. And I think it's just going to be one of those election seasons in which the money always matters, but it won't matter as much. And so that weakens the play of a Jeb Bush. It weakens the play of other establishment candidates that want to vector themselves into position knowing that they can raise the money because they're willing to sell their souls to get the spot. But when you have a guy in there who can self-finance, who can write a massive check and who never backs down on anything and knows how to get free media like nobody's business, you are in serious trouble if you think you're going to overcome that. Hey, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with more of the Tim Donnelly Show. It's fight night in Milwaukee. And no, I'm not talking about the Packers. I'm talking about the GOP, the pack of suited Republicans. I can't say conservatives because a lot of them are not conservatives. That is a misnomer to equivocate the two. There was a hotly contested undercard debate with a feud between Governor Bobby Jindal of Louisiana, and Chris Christie. You've got Jindal, who has been out there attacking Chris Christie and others, saying that they are untrustworthy sellouts. And I don't know how that sells. I don't know how that comes across, and whether or not that transfers any votes and points in polls to the attacker. But Chris Christie ignored it in his showing uncharacteristic discipline in the face of annoyance, repeatedly said he's more interested in beating Hillary Clinton. And in a poll, he is listed as one of the guys who could beat her, even though I don't think you're going to see Chris Christie be the nominee. I just don't see it. But we like Governor Bobby Jindal's credentials on a number of issues. He's one of the strongest hawks on illegal immigration, and being the son of immigrants, he's able to say things that a lot of other candidates just don't have the courage to say, which is just speak the truth. And unfortunately, in today's politics, that has become a rarity. I do think you will see at least one of the candidates decide to take on Hillary as the foil rather than the other candidates. And that's an interesting strategy. There's always someone who tries it. And is met with a certain amount of success if it's well executed. But if that's all you do is harp on Hillary Clinton all night, look, you've got to tell people, and you've got to do this in a way that's not so didactic. Instead of telling people how great you are, which almost every Republican candidate has been doing that. Hey, I am the person for the job because I did this and I did that and I have this experience and I fixed my state and look at me. It's amazing how many of these candidates have referenced former President Ronald Reagan, who, if you remember, started out as governor of California. And he didn't get there by standing up and giving speeches about himself. He got there by traveling all over the state of California, actually paid for by General Electric, of all companies, giving speeches about America and what it meant, and about how the government had become the greatest threat to our future and our freedom. And it resonated with people. And he was not meaning to be political, because he was being paid to sort of be an inspirational speaker to the massive number of employees that General Electric had at factories all over California. And I think actually all over the country. I think he was traveling the country doing this speaking circuit. But Ronald Reagan's message was one of hope. It was one of truth. It was one of identifying evil and then prescribing solutions, simple things that everybody could buy into, things that you almost couldn't argue against because of the way that he stated them and the way, more importantly, the way he framed the debate. He didn't frame the debate in a way that only Republicans could buy in. Because, by the way, remember, he was a Democrat right up until he gave the speech, Time for Choosing, one of his most famous speeches, on October 27th of 1963, when he was standing there as a surrogate speaker for Republican presidential candidate Barry Goldwater. And in that 29 minutes, 33 seconds of absolute sheer brilliance, he won the hearts and minds of many Americans. He brought them over to the Republican cause. He raised about $8.5 million in 2 weeks, the Republican Party. And that was back when $8.5 million was $8.5 million. It was a lot of money. And he started out his speech by saying, up until now, I've been a Democrat, and I've recently changed course. He didn't demonize the Democrat Party. So if you were a Democrat and you sort of had thoughtful disagreements with your party, guess what? You could hear what he said. If you're a Republican, you're thrilled to hear somebody has become a Republican that was a Democrat, because then now it emphasizes what he's going to say, because you want to hear why he switched over. You want to understand what his message is, and he is essentially underscoring your values. So now, whatever the guy says, you think he's brilliant because he agrees with you. Even if he's a much better speaker, even if he's going to put it in far better language. And so this is the conundrum, I believe, for the entire GOP. Which is, when are you going to stop talking about Reagan? And when is someone going to channel him? When is someone... We saw glimpses of it in Senator Ted Cruz in the CNBC debate, where he stood up, he threw down the gauntlet, and he was magnificent. He had his moment. And it was almost exactly what someone like President Ronald Reagan might have done. So the debate will start as soon as we go off air. And unfortunately, I will not be able to bring you the gripping coverage that I would like to, but we will be discussing this tomorrow. We've also got a great guest coming tomorrow. We're going to be talking about guns. So if you're into guns, you definitely do not want to miss tomorrow's show. Of course, tomorrow's Veterans Day. And by the way, to all of you Marines out there, I want to say happy birthday to the Marine Corps. I know there's a lot of Marines that listen to this show. Hoorah, and thank you for your service. We are with you. We've got your back, and we celebrate with you. It's always November 10th, the birthday of the Marine Corps, followed by Veterans Day. Tomorrow, we will dedicate the show to you. And, you know, we do things a little differently. We will be fighting for your freedom here at home. We will have your back, because I believe that is the greatest way that we can thank you for your service. And so we endeavor, as always, to inform, educate, and engage so that we have freedom to pass on to the next generation. I don't do this show alone. I want to thank my chief engineer, Sean McNeil, all our sponsors, and you. God bless you. And Godspeed. Tim Donnelly Show, out.